It's Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. I'm back with the most interesting articles in growth and marketing. Three great articles today. First up, First Round speaks with Wade Foster, CEO of Zapier, about the unconventional lessons he's learned in founding the company. Second, the CEO of Hook, which is a customer success platform, talks about why he took this unique approach to customer success and why it's so beneficial for organizations. And third, an article from Ariyh, which dives into the science on how companies can potentially increase click-through rates on their buttons up to 55%. So let's get started. Let's kick things off with this article from First Round about Wade Foster, founder and CEO of Zapier. Again, I don't know Zapier. I think it might be Zapier, but I'm not sure. I guess I could go take a look, but I'm just going to go with Zapier. All right. In this article, he shares his contrarian takes on building $1 billion company. And so I love this article. It's so interesting because it is completely different. Well, not completely different, but it's different than you traditionally hear. It's not this exciting startup story. It's about focusing on the fundamentals, and it's different. And so I had skeptical ears when I hear Silicon Valley advice around. Well, you can't build a company that way, or you'll never be an important company doing that way. So he's receiving this advice that says you can't do it that way, and he did it. And so how did he do that? And I like this quote from him because it focuses so much on the basics. Building startups is not a particularly glamorous thing in spite of how the media makes it look. A lot of it's just doing sales or doing customer support hundreds of thousands of times over and over again and being really committed to being exceptional at it. Just that focus on the basics. How can you be exceptional for your customers? So his first lesson is you don't need to raise a boatload of money. So Zapier was founded in Missouri, and so there's not a ton of VC money floating around in order to fund these companies. So they had to take a different approach. And he said traditional startup founders may be hesitant to plan, or this is from the article. Traditional startup founders may be hesitant to plan on starting or growing a company without much backing. But Wade says our reference point, the reference point for Zapier, was not that traditional way of growing a business, but our reference point is an incredibly fast growing company, one that's doing exceptionally well, has an actual business, is making profits. So just a really well run business. And it forced us to ask, does the advice of receiving funding really apply to us? It didn't. So we said, well, that's good advice, but we're a different company. So instead, they focused on just running this great company instead of worrying so much about funding. Lesson 2, think about distribution from day one. And this is a great lesson here. He's saying you need to focus not just on your product, but how you're going to sell that product. That's a mistake. So focusing just on your product, he says that's a mistake. I think one of the biggest things that founders, especially product-minded founders, overlook is they say, oh, I have some great ideas for product X, Y, or Z in this category. The incumbent stinks for these reasons, and I think I can make a better version of it than, say, Salesforce. What they don't realize is the thing that actually helps Salesforce win is not necessarily that the product is amazing. It's that they have this incredible distribution engine that is really difficult to compete against. So Salesforce is great at selling Salesforce, and their size really helps. And so just having a better product doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to beat Salesforce because they're so good at selling and their brand is so strong. As people say, no one gets fired for bringing on Salesforce. So if you're going to challenge them, you really need to think about how you're going to sell. So what did Wade do? So when they got started, he knew this asset they had was this volume of integrations they could do. And so he focused on organic search and providing content related to these integrations. If you're looking for integrations, there are all these different key results that you could conceivably rank for, but no one is trying to rank for this stuff. If we had a landing page that you could connect Salesforce and Zendesk, or you could connect QuickBooks and PayPal, that would stand out, said Foster. And I remember this. If you go back to 2011 and after, if you search for anything related to integrations, Zapier was showing up. It was amazing. It didn't matter. Connect A to B, B to C, whatever it was, Zapier was showing up. They built this tremendous organic search presence. In fact, I would copy what they did and say to my clients, hey, do you have integrations? How many integrations do you have? Let's put out content related to that. But this is how they started distributing their product. And it makes total sense. They produce these pages and people are searching for these specific connections, and Zapier offers a solution. And so they're gonna interact with it. There's very low competition. It was very related to what the person's searching for. And so it was a great way to sell the product. And so the team took the lean startup approach and spun up an app directory of all sorts of different integrations Zapier might eventually serve without even having a single customer. We just thought, hey, we'll build this little app directory and build some landing pages, see if we can get people coming through and search, and then talk to them to see if we can build an integration for them. That was the style of product development we were doing at the time. So, lesson number 3, when the product solves a true problem, it can withstand some jankiness. And so in the beginning, people struggled to get set up with it. They thought they had this way of setting people up, but he realized that people were struggling with this. So with one specific customer, he actually set up a Skype call to say, "Hey, can I walk you through this?" The customer was trying to get a contact form on his website powered by Wufoo and connect folks who signed up to an Aweber email list. So that was that integration. After an admittedly painful Skype setup process, you can tell how old Zapier is because it's Skype. I rarely see Skype anymore. I don't even know if Skype's in an offering anymore. The integration worked. So they had this video call, the integration worked. But here's what's so cool about this. And the customer says, Wade, this has kind of changed my life. And that's what you want. You want people to be wowed by what you do. If you're able to deliver, what I like to say, if you're able to deliver this miracle for them, they're willing to overlook some of the other things. And so Zapier was able to do this. He changed his life. And I remember, and this is Wade saying, and I remember thinking, this is what it actually feels like when you make something somebody cares about. All right, lesson number 4, don't hire until it hurts. So Zapier is very judicious in how it grew because it was trying to keep the speed. And so he didn't rush headcount. Lots of folks have said to us, you're growing, you could grow faster if you hire more people. I think a lot of companies and investors overpitch growth at all costs, but sometimes that causes a more people, more problems issue. And so because he was trying to be agile, move quickly, he was concerned about expanding too quickly because that makes those things more challenging. And so he expanded very judiciously. Well, on the flip side, we moved to lesson number 5. He would have brought in experienced managers earlier. And this is, and he said, don't overlook veterans. And he thinks, the reason for this is because it helps cut the painful lessons, the growth lessons. If you go to people who've done this before, they can help you figure out things quicker. And so that helps you grow faster. And he says, there's never been a situation I've regretted hiring someone more senior. And so don't overlook veterans. And the other lesson in this, founders shouldn't shy away from hiring senior leaders early on, but they need to make sure the person is still willing to roll up their sleeves. And that's critical. You want someone who's got the strategic insights, who's had the lessons learned, but still willing to put the work in. And that's what they did. Lesson number 6, you don't need to go enterprise to build a massive business. And this is growing enterprise is a growth strategy we hear all the time. And it seems like, oh, this is easy. Small and medium-sized businesses love us. We're just going to go enterprise. There's no reason why we can't scale. But Zapier didn't do that. They said, hey, our market is small and medium-sized businesses. That's where they're going to grow. And it's work for them. So you don't, I know it's like a bright, shiny object to go enterprise, but you don't necessarily need to do that. Maybe just you need to be great for small and medium-sized businesses to grow your business. And this is an example of where that worked. Lesson number 7, avoid getting caught in the roadmap rat race. And this sort of is touches upon something I shared yesterday from Dave Kellogg. Maintaining your roadmap, a pristine roadmap, is critical. As Dave Kellogg said, your research and development is one of your most precious resources. So you don't want to use it on things that are not strategic, that are not going to drive a significant improvement in revenue and growth. And Foster says, as he tells it, there's a big difference between being inspired by a novel UX feature and going tit for tat with someone else's roadmap. You get into this tricky thing where you feel like you've got to keep up and match the roadmap one for one. because oftentimes you don't actually know why it is building that feature, what's going on behind the scenes. And so you need to build a roadmap that matches your customers, that will deliver what you're trying to do, not necessarily match your competitors for one. I mean, if there's a lesson learned, if there's something good that they did and it works within what you're doing, then that's fine. But just keeping up with features, just putting features on your roadmap because your competitors did that is a road to failure. It's not a roadmap to success. Lesson number 8, resist getting too high off your winning streak. Foster is a big fan of Annie Duke, who quite literally wrote the book on decision making. And I think this is interesting. What he finds most compelling from her work is the idea that good decisions can breed both good and bad outcomes. Similarly, because of the unpredictable nature of running a business, you can make a bad decision and have it lead to something either great or terrible. Most people don't think of it that way, says Foster. They think because they made a good decision, they'll definitely get a good outcome. But that's not the case. And I would take it even further than Duke by saying that a good decision could yield a good outcome, a bad one, or a variety of outcomes. So don't get too tied up on the outcome of the decision. Realize you made a decision, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna be a good outcome. But so you need to move on from just thinking so much about, hey, I made the right decision, but it resulted in a bad outcome. What happened? You need to make your decision and move on. If you remain flexible, even in places where you really do think you got it right, and give yourself a chance to be proven incorrect, you're setting yourself and your company up for success. Anyway, I love this story. That's 8 lessons from Zapier that Wade Foster provided. And so it's helpful if you're starting up a business or you have started a business to think about the things that he's done. Is there any opportunity to learn from them? I think there's some really good lessons here. And so definitely take a look at that. Next up, why I Started Hook by Firaas Rashid. And I love this too. So Firaas started in IT operations for an investment bank, and we used almost every product we could find. That's what he says. He says the main challenge I faced with every new product that I bought was the significant gap between the demo and ultimately getting value out of the product. So this is how what started him down this path. He's like, hey, I saw how awesome this product is, but I'm not getting that value out of it when I actually start using it. And so as he started looking at customer success, he started sharpening this idea. He started thinking about this idea in more detail. In the early days of this journey, I spent a lot of time interviewing potential candidates for CSSMs and was surprised at the indicators that the industry was using to prioritize customers. scores, customer satisfaction surveys, number of quarterly business reviews came up consistently in almost every conversation. You hear this all the time. Yet, as a career buyer of software, these factors had never influenced my decision to renew or buy more of a product. That decision was almost influenced by factors such as utilization, stickiness, and value derived. We set out to find the leading indicators for customers who stayed and grew. And what we found was an overwhelming validation of our approach. Our data showed that in almost every metric we looked at, e.g., team engagement, product utilization, contact with support, sales leads, market events, the level of customer engagement had a direct correlation with retention and growth of an account. And sentiment had no correlation. So he's saying, if you're using it, you're staying, regardless of what you say. In other words, if a customer was using our product, engaged with our teams, it didn't matter whether they're sentimentally happy or not. They stayed and spent more money with us. And so he said, what amazed me in this journey was that how products on the market aimed at CS teams were solving the entirely wrong problem. We achieved all this by focusing on where the data told us to, and not whether our customers seem happy or not. In simple terms, we spent more time with quieter customers that were more likely to leave us and less time with customers that complained. So is that the approach most companies are taking? I think most of the time people are reaching out to people who are complaining and not looking at usage. So the CS teams were focused on the wrong problem. They were focused on creating manual tasks, running manual playbooks, or setting up reminders for calls. Even where there were health scores, they were created manually based on gut feel, made up mostly of metrics like sentiment and NPS, and weren't actionable because it's difficult to understand what the scores meant. In the months that followed, I spoke with hundreds of customer success and revenue leaders. The same things kept coming up as their top priorities. It was difficult for CS teams to use data to understand which customers they need to focus on. When the teams did manage to know which customers to focus on, it was difficult to understand which actions they should take. And when they took action, it was difficult to do at scale and measure what worked and didn't. So he said he set out on a mission to fix this problem by starting a hook. And so the idea is looking at engagement to understand who's going to churn. And so that's what Hook solves for. Our predictive platform uses your customer, product, marketing, sales, support, and other data to automatically predict renewals, net dollar retention, and upsells. We translate these predictions into automatically triggered actions to optimize these outcomes. And so it's just a different approach to customer satisfaction, customer support is looking at engagement. So the takeaway from this should be maybe take a look at your data and see who's engaged. See if you see a similar pattern of data within your database to see which customers are churning and maybe not focus on NPS and customer sat scores so much. And you should be able to do this analysis. Anyway, so I think this is a great perspective. Definitely encourage you to take a look at that. Finally, rounded CTA buttons drive more clicks. Now, this is really interesting because it says curved CTA buttons receive 17 to 55% higher clicks than buttons with sharp angles. And so, what I really think is interesting about this story is that the approach they take, and this is the approach that they're always taking. And so it really leads to some interesting takeaways. They're trying to take a more scientific approach. I think this is ERA is the name of it. It's ARIYH. And so they're trying to take this more scientific approach to these experiments, which obviously I really appreciate. He shows an example here, but the findings, and here's the data that they got these findings from. As part of 8 experiments, researchers found that when using rounded CTA buttons versus sharp edge ones, a restaurant ad received almost a 25% higher click-through rate, and people were 17% more likely to click to order food online. A landing page for an event planning tool had a 55% higher click-through rate. Students in a lab study were 46% more likely to click on a button to take an extra survey. Customers put 26% more into their basket when shopping for smartphone accessories. In an eye tracking experiment, people looked at the button for 28.6% longer, and their gaze returned to the button 62% more. And then he goes into why this works. So he brings in some research about why a rounded button would be more effective. So he's got the data hypothesis about why this is working. He talks about the limitations of the study, which is basically these aren't necessarily real world examples. If you're trying to replicate this result, the results may be different because of these factors. And then he brings in some companies that are actually using this approach. So and then talks about the steps to implement this recommendation. So I really like this approach in this article. It's got the data, the steps to implement, many different studies showing supporting the results. And so, like in this instance, I would definitely try it out. Who doesn't want a 55% higher click-through rate? That seems really high to me. I'd be really surprised that anyone would be able to match those results. And the other big thing here is, what does this translate to in revenue? I mean, clicking a button is one thing, but does it actually increase sales the way, at a similar level? My guess is the answer is no. But we have the data here. We have the steps here to try to replicate this. And that's what we're trying to do, is replicate this. So I really appreciate this article. So definitely go try out rounded buttons. See if you increase your click-through rate by 55%. Anyway, those are 3 articles, some really great takeaways. Think about growing your business a little differently based on the example from Zapier. Think about looking at your customer success metrics. Maybe look at engagement within your system, not just the customer satisfaction scores. And then finally, test out rounded buttons. Maybe you'll get a 55% increase. Regardless, you have the steps to be able to take it and some data to support it.